Storm of the Century. Dear whoever finds this, my name is Stephen. I'm 25 years old and, well, if you're reading this, then I'm afraid that I'm long gone. Where, you ask? Your guess is as good as mine. Dead, alive, or something much worse. I cannot tell you. I'm currently sat in my basement. I say currently, but I've been in this dreary, beaten brick-walled prison for weeks now. Maybe months. Time isn't relevant down here. Nothing is relevant. I'm here now, and in all honesty, I don't know whether that's good or bad. I started counting down the days by etching a dash for each day. But after the sun went down and never came up, I stopped. The small rectangular window, being my only connection to the outside world, didn't last very long, although, with the rain cascading down it, I couldn't really see out of it anyway. Just a warped screenshot from my neighborhood. What was once my beacon of hope became my tormentor. Knowing just outside that window I could be free. But for how long? The voices come to me regularly. I only ever get a short respite before they start weeping again. Telling me it's safe out. Pleading at me to open the door. All I know is I'm safe right now. Safety is a concept I took for granted. Now, I truly know the meaning of the word. Being able to walk outside, breathe the fresh air without knowing it could be your last. I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to get this written down whilst I still can, and whilst I'm still sane enough to remember. I'll go back to the beginning, before the sun went black and this basement became my tomb. Before the voices became tempting. I used to have a pretty boring life, stacking shelves 5 days a week, painting portraits and luscious landscapes in a little free time I had in between. Sometimes I'd conjure up morbid scenes, future cities built like concrete jungles, barren, nuclear wastelands. There's something calming about seeing a decriminated world and then looking out of your window to see luscious fields and knowing it could be all decimated in a few short weeks. God, even a flock of pigeons would have been welcome sight if I only knew. It was during one of my 15-hour shifts, stacking boxes on top of boxes, that something felt off. It was the start of this lockdown, the storm in this youth, but still on the tip of everyone's tongue. The media were calling it the storm of the century. We didn't have many, if any, storms in England. An occasional bit of a shitty weather, but never like this. It was a pain with all the panic buyers, but hey, they were paying my overtime for menial task, so I can't complain. Susie came up to me just after my shift started. Her cute and button nose looking up to me. The 5'2" brunette, 20-year-old, had been a close friend since secondary school. We never really talked much in school, or even outside of it, really. Now that I think about it, I guess my version of a close friend was someone I say hi to more than once a week. We worked together for a few months now, and she always made time for me, although I didn't really reply much. We text on and off to catch up on each other's lives. We both had rough patches in our lives, and for some odd reason, we also confide in each other. "Hey Steven, any plans for the weekend?" Her eyes twinkling with a look of excitement splattering across her face. "Hey Sue, not much. Just going to have a quiet one in. Gotta take my dog Rex to the vet whilst I still get a chance." "Ah, right. Sounds fun. Well, I'm having a party Saturday night, so feel free to stop by. I mean, if you're not too busy." "Yeah, sure. I'll think about it," I confidently said, knowing fully well that I wouldn't be attending. I hated the social expectation having friends brought with it. I'd much rather stay in my own bubble and mind my own business. The companionship was nice at times, but I'd soon find myself overwhelmed and anxious. A smile lit up on her face instantly, to my acceptance, as she skipped off down the aisle, leaving me to get on with my day. I popped my playlist on and blocked out the world before getting back to my endless stacking of ravaged shelves, hoping they last longer than 10 minutes before I had to repeat the whole ordeal. It was about 6 hours into my usual routine of plugging out the world when it was disturbed by this guttural calling. Distant first. I could hear it in the background when the music was quiet, thinking it was just part of the songs that I never picked up on, or distortion through my headphones. I couldn't make out a single note of it, but it was definitely something. I got progressively louder throughout the next few tracks, right up till I started drowning out my music, then my thoughts, till all I could think and hear was it. I ripped out my headphones, hoping it would end my torment. It worked for a split second, my eyes trying to recover, when just as quickly as it stopped, a gargantuan boom echoed around me, reverberating through my bones. "Come here, come here, come here." I snapped to and realized Mrs. Peters, one of our regulars late afternoon shoppers, was calling me. "Come here," she barked, whilst pointing to the can of dog food, just outside of reach of her frail, bony fingers. The veil of anxiety washed away just as quickly as it was coursing through my veins. "Of course, coming," I cheerfully exhaled as I reached past her, plucking the can of processed shit that her dog would happily munch down on later. As she snatched the premium dog chum out of my hand, I noticed something. Her hands, they were completely white and frozen to the touch. I swear, my heart skipped a beat when she touched me. A vicious sweat broke across my brow instantly as I saw her eyes. Oh God, her eyes! The usual brown safe haven of Mrs. Peters' warm eyes had disappeared. All I could see was a never-ending abyss in place of those dark amber eyes, staring to my soul, judging my every sin. I felt completely powerless. A sharp pain seared into my back of my skull, crippling me completely. The calling came back. This time it wasn't distant and wasn't coming from her. I mean, she was mouthing the words, but I could hear it inside of my head like a siren will intoxicating my every existence. Whilst this didn't sound like the unusual, chirpy pensioner, it definitely sounded like the monstrosity stood before me. I stumbled back, hitting the shelves behind, causing a small army of cereal boxes to crash to the floor. Every cell of my being wanted to run out of the store and never come back. I looked up, terror somehow playing me like a puppet master, even though no part of me wanted to see that thing again. She wasn't there. I don't mean she had walked off. She took about a year to get around the shop, as it was on a good day. She completely disappeared. In an asylum full of assholes, acting as roadblocks. How could this 82-year-old lady disappear without so much of a trace? Worst of all, that damn can was back on its shelf. I picked myself up and steadied myself, trying not to look crazy after already making a dick on myself. I patted my shirt down, pushing the picture of Mrs. Peters' god-forsaken face to the furthest recess of my mind. A few people saw and gave a few looks. Concerned, but definitely confusion riddled within. I plastered a fake smile on my face and got on with my day. The rest of my shift went without a hitch, trying to forget about the day's earlier event, just attributing it to my overactive imagination and a little old lady demanding help who managed to pull a Houdini with all the extra bodies in the store. I was working ridiculous shifts and tired to no end. I just needed rest, right? It wasn't that easy though. I had this overpowering feeling of dread poisoning me my every thought. Thinking back now, I shouldn't have been so naive. But hey, no one could have predicted what was happening. And in all honesty, what could I do? Anyway, I was just about done with my shift, drained, hungry, and ready for a quick bike home to my empty 2-story wooden farmhouse, passed down through my family. I was the only one left of the Charles family. My mom passed away when I was just 7, breast cancer. My father, a drunk who didn't know what he loved more, alcohol or himself, ran away shortly after, only leaving a note on the floor of the basement door. No one has heard from him since. My grandparents took reign of my childhood, and I can lie, they gave me a good life. They let me run free and well. I guess that's why I'm the way I am today. When I turned 18, the house got signed into my name and I lived there ever since. Being a kid in the middle of nowhere, without anyone your age, means you have to find other ways to entertain yourselves. I used to have a few imaginary friends. I forget the names now, but they helped a lot. My background doesn't matter too much to this still. I used to have to go to doctors a few times a week as a child. After a couple of years pumped with medication, my grandparents stopped making me go. Thought it was too much for someone my age. Thanks to getting everything I had to take and being so young, I forgot what it was that I went for exactly. Sorry, I'm losing track again. I like to say that was my only encounter I had that day, but cycling home at 1 AM was like walking to Mordor. The shadows taunted me, anticipating me to take just one look, no matter how hard I tried to focus on the roads. Each alleyway whispered my deepest desires, my inner fears. I could feel every hair on my body raised, goosebumps tickling my arms. The hordes hidden in my depths of the winding side roads challenged me to look. The rain had started to hammer down, calling for my attention to the main on the roads. Turning the block just before the home stretch usually gave me a second wind, carrying me back to those 4 warm walls, my shelter from everything and everyone. That's when I heard a piercing scream. It wasn't just calling from anyone. It called me by my name. Stephen! Please, help! I slammed on my brakes, almost flying over the handlebars, and just stopped for what felt like forever. Scanning the area, like a captain with his periscope. Stephen! A chill ran down my spine, and I didn't stop till my whole body shivered. It was right behind me. Not in one of the den of thieves, shrouded in darkness, but it felt like 2 feet behind me. Every logical part of me was telling me to go, don't turn back, get home, bolt the door and hide. After an age of deliberating, I slowly crammed my head around, right foot resting just above my paddle, ready to sprint. There she was. It was Mrs. Peters. Those same vile eyes staring me down, consuming me. The flickering streetlight barely illuminating her corpse-like body. There was no mistaking those eyes. This time, I could see further into them somehow, as if the darkness of night enveloping around us gave them more strength. I hadn't noticed at first, but she was completely bare. No clothing, nothing. Her feet dirty and black from the gravel. You'd think that was enough to unnerve me, and I suppose it was. That's when I noticed the skin on her body. It sagged, but not like it naturally would through old age. It was as if it wasn't hers. Or at least it wasn't whatever what stood in front of me. I never seen skin so white and devoid of life. I didn't wait to see what she had in store for me. She started to reach forward, as if begging for help again, just as she did at work. Before her hand had lifted even an inch, I threw my right leg forward, pushing down at the pedals as if my life depended on it. I didn't stop. I barely even took a breath till I saw my front door. I ran in, hearing it again. Stephen, it's me! This time, I couldn't decipher where from, but I didn't care. If I got inside, I'd be safe, right? Throwing the door open and slamming it behind me, I heard nails clicking along the old pine flooring. At first slow, but now sounding to gallop towards me. The image of the woman running towards me, skin trailing behind her like a flag, flooded my thoughts. I started to run, and just as I got to the foot of the stairs, something lunged at me, making me collapse to the floor. My head thumped off the floor, throwing me into a state of shock, and without thinking, I covered my face, fearing the worst, praying to God to make it quick. Don't make me suffer. I felt its presence bearing over me, blocking out the porch light shining through my front door. The clicking of its nails, sending shrieking thoughts through my body. It got closer. I felt a warm breath in my hands, being my last bastion of defense. The disgusting stench it brought with it was enough to make me throw up. Then a loud piggy snort and licking ensued. Fuck. It was Rex. A big old brute of a staffy was happy to see me. Lord knows I was happy to see him too. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling all the tension fade away, pushing myself to a seated position against the wall and played with him for a few minutes, immediately forgetting about what just happened. Dogs have a way of doing that. I got myself a quick shower, made dinner, and went to serve Rex in his dog bowl he protected with his life. Looking for the dog food, I noticed something. Among all of the cans, there was just one out of place. Now, Rex was a fuzzy dog, believe it or not, so I knew to get the same selection every time. Out of one of the cans that stood to attention, to the left, out of recommend, was the one Mrs. Peters asked for earlier. Premium duck chum. Thoughts crashing down on me again, like waves on the coast. A second panic attack starting to usher its way in. Without second guessing myself, I picked it up, opened my back door and threw it. Not every neighbor friendly, but I'd had enough. Trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy, I served up Rex's meal and, shortly after, got myself into bed. As much as my brain wanted to progress everything that just happened throughout the day, I was exhausted. I drifted off in record time. The next morning I woke up, head foggy. I may have passed out instantly, but waking up well rested was not on the agenda that day. Rex was just sitting in the corner that morning. He gave me a nod of approval and I patted him on the head. "Hey buddy, you ready for the vets?" I said in a voice we all say for our furballs. The storm was starting to pick up outside. Those ominous clouds soon took over the sky, blocking out the sun, and I decided I'll take them next week. With my plans dashed for the one-day weekend I had, I decided to skip breakfast and get straight to painting. I opted to do another portrait, something a bit cheery. I'd had enough morbidity for a while, so wanted to take my mind off. As for the hours passed, fully taking in the masterpiece I was creating, Rex still sat in his corner. I decided to grab a bite to eat. The wind was whistling throughout the hollow bones of my home. I took another look outside, and all I could see were those jet black clouds, never ending. The rain was heavy now. Mini rivers raging down the side of the streets and creating whirlpools around the drains. I scanned the street for any sign of life. Not a soul was out. Well, that's what I thought. As I started to turn and draw my curtains, I noticed footprints in the grass, just in front of my window. No tracks of someone walking to the spot outside my window. Just two footprints, about 3 feet away. The rain must have been coming down for hours by the time, but the grass looked completely dry where the feet had been. As if whoever had been out there had been there all day. I noticed a blackening around the edges of solitary tracks. Was it burnt or someone sort of substance? As I tried to inspect the unknown goop closer, a glint in the window caught my attention. 2 piercing orbs hung there, just below my eyeline. Looking closer to see where they were emanating from, I noticed something. They weren't from outside. They were right behind me. A tingle ran down my spine as the pin dropped. I span around, almost sweeping myself on my feet. Nothing. Something in the back of my head made me look over the basement door. A sense of dread always swept across me within the thought of going down there. Still standing by the window, I listened out in silence, trying to detect anything out of place. I can't tell you how difficult it was, with the rain bombarding the windows and the wind risking to rip my door off. Creak. I contorted my neck, almost giving myself a whiplash. Creak. I looked over the labor of my day, the painting. The noise coming directly behind it. In denial of the terror I was experiencing, I creeped over to it. The area, being dimly lit by the grey strands of sunlight that pierced through the clouds, made it difficult to see from the other side of the room. It was as I got closer that I started to hone in on the source of the sound. The goddamn painting. The innocent blonde-haired Mona Lisa I was creating wasn't how I left it. The hair that boasted a light gold was brown with dirty grey roots, threatening to take over. The smile, which once shone brighter than the pearly whites, now featured brown. Decaying teeth have no longer sat where they should. I couldn't breathe. A new voice came to me that instant. It imitated Susie. Badly. Gargled words plagued my mind. I wasn't too shaken up by the picture to even try to comprehend them. If I could hazard a guess now, parts sounded Latin, but I could feel some of the things I heard weren't intended for human ears or minds. They paralyzed me, leaving me completely nervous wreck, unable to move, think. Hell, I don't even remember breathing. As terrified as they were, I felt a sense of clarity and something familiar about them from my core, which didn't manifest itself till afterwards. As suddenly as the tongue of ancients had started lashing my mind, they disappeared, turning back to the hastily painting they have been, as on all fours, clutching at my head. I had returned to the sincere woman it was before. No eyes of pure sorrow, no tattooed skin, and her teeth back to the former glory. Knowing I was beginning to fall into madness, concocted by my own mixture of lack of sleep, anxiety, and my own worst enemy, my mind. I decided it was time to go to sleep. Rex hadn't moved all day. Hadn't touched his ball, or food either. Before I hit the hay, I decided to replace his food just in case he started to get fuzzy with his unusual delicacy. Picking up the first can I could reach from the cupboard, I lazily opened it up and lettered it into his bowl, to make sure he had something. I also put a couple of dog treats next to his bowl. The little guy hadn't eaten all day. Finally, nothing to do but surrender to my night. My head hit a goose-feathered pillow, and I was lost in the comfort of my king-size mattress for once. I was plagued by horrible things that night. Even now I can't recall what I witnessed, or what I heard, but this overbearing feeling of doom took over me. The only thing I can remember is seeing the blackness, the ever-evolving dark that seemed to take form and dissipate back into nothingness, endless. It was almost the same as when you close your eyes in the dark, your eyelids firmly shut, but your eyes still focusing and seeing nothing. Multicolored strips flash by and you know nothing is there, but your instincts scream at you to open your eyes. I woke up, sheet-soaked, and my body dripping from sweat. A buzz of paranoia overwhelmed me, every limb feeling like static as my nerves were bombarded. Scanning my room, everything was in order. No boogeyman ready to pounce on, no noises other than the rain, and wind whistling through the neighborhood. I laughed at myself, gave myself a quick pep talk so I could get ready for a long day at work, and jumped in the shower. Getting out of the shower, towel draped across me like a Roman emperor, I heard a quick tapping on the front door. It got louder and louder. Whoever was down there must have had something important to tell me, as long as it wasn't another idiot doll salesman. No, I would not like your miracle cleaner. Throwing my dressing gown on, the tapping turned into loud bangs. "Let us in!" running through my house as I clambered down the stairs. The wind really must have been picking up as the call for help drifted away and didn't really begin or end from the door. I got to the foot of the door and swung it open. "I'd hit you the first time. I have a doorbell, you know," I said, trying to act as alpha as I could. There was nothing there. Again. Nothing except a torrent of water and wind buffeting my porch. The storm was getting into its worst now, and I could see the trees swaying as if they had no roots. A piercing but distant sound of metal, warping and grinding, could also be heard in the distance. I was shook up from the last few days of panic buying and whatever it was I'd been seeing and hearing. I completely forgot my house was in a danger zone of the storm, knowing I wouldn't be able to go to work till this has cleared. I called in and told them I wouldn't be there. They didn't understand my reasoning, but I didn't care. I wanted to stay safe, and going to work during this wasn't happening. Instead, I decided to storm-proof my house. This was an older house, and whilst it had been standing strong for generations, I wasn't stupid enough to think the house could take a full brunt of a storm without a little help. I threw my heavy-duty jacket on, boots and waterproofs, and ventured out to the local hardware store to pick up some 2x4 and nails. The second I stepped outside, I was challenged by the ungodly weather, soaked within seconds. I ran to and from the store, almost getting pushed into the road a number of times. Getting home, I quickly got to the task and boarded up my windows. I made quick work of it, fighting with the wind as I tried to wrestle the planks from the grasp. As I was getting to the last ones, I realized this was where those footprints had been, surveying the grass. I couldn't see them now, or the black remains that should have been burnt into the terrace still. This eased me a little. Knowing what I'd seen the other night wasn't there and could have just been my imagination brought everything into perspective. Finishing off, I debated whether covering the windows was enough. After getting weary of the rain within the next minutes, I decided to leave it. No need to bolt the doors down. Not yet, at least. The storm was predicted to last about another week, and things went without a hitch the first 2 days. Nothing to scare me or entice me out of my home. I painted like never before, using my visions I had as inspiration, instead of a fuel to burn myself to the ground. It was day 3 when I started hearing the scratching. Minding my business and playing with rags in this corner. The sound of nails on a chalkboard, screeching through my soul. It was coming from the outside of my living room window, where the footprints had been. The slow, insidious noise that demanded all attention slowly got more erratic. Walking over to the window, I tried to peer out through the stance of light, staying hidden from the investigator of the sound. The sky had a red hue to the dark grey in comparison, almost like every inch visible. But in front of my window stood something. This wasn't what I was used to. This wasn't something anyone would be used to. This wasn't natural. Standing directly in front of the window was this thing. It was nothing like what I'd been encountering in the past few days. Its body was brown and mummified. Shavings of skin hung to its frame, ready to flake off at the slightest shake. The flesh around his chest had started to rot. I could see maggots poking their heads out as they took in fresh air for the first time, quickly retreating and burying the way back into their blanket. Its legs and arms were almost completely scaped over, with dark rats oozing here and there. I saw those bony fingers again, whilst the rest of the thing was pureed. Its hands were bleach white, with quick faded to a rotten brown at the wrists. Usually, veins would show like the northern lights on a white this pale, but it was completely devoid of any life. Its long nails had cracked and shattered into dozens of sharp daggers. I couldn't quite make out its face. I didn't want to either. Whatever this thing was, I had already seen enough. It just stood there, twitching unnaturally every few seconds. Cracks, devastating its forearms with each rapture of movements. It struggled to lift its carcass-like arm, but eventually managed to raise it just above my eye level. So far it hadn't made any signs it knew I was here. Angled like a contortionist, with my head at 90 degrees with the rest of my body pressed up against the wall. Its blackened nails pressed against a pane of glass that was peeking between the planks on the other side of the window. It clumsily scraped across it, each millimeter bringing with a chorus of pain and suffering. I struggled not to let out the agony of my breath, but I held it down. Its fingers danced along the glass for another minute before I heard a bark come from behind me. Finally! Rex had woken up. I gave him a little nod and held my finger to my lips, hoping he would be quiet. He seemed to get with the program straight away, turning back to show before me. I saw nothing. No noises, no hideous monster to drag me out. That's when I looked out of the window, properly this time. My head no longer dangling at an angle. Looking straight ahead, I realized something. I hadn't just been scratching the window. It had written something, trying to make out the jagged edges. I realized they were letters. I see you. At first I stood there in disbelief. This couldn't be real, could it? As it all dawned upon me, I started to shake. Tears started to caress my cheeks and I fell to the floor before me, scared to death and worried what might happen next. I started to board up every opening in my house. Any entrance and exit I had blocked. Nothing in, nothing out. I'd be safe from this storm and whatever it brought with it. The only thing coming through were a few beams of sunlight in most openings. Rays of hope to keep me going. Although with the storm showing no signs of stopping soon, those were few and far between. I shouted over to Rex, thinking my trusty companion would protect me, but he was still in his corner. No, not. Maybe he's been as tired as I have. I didn't bother to go over to him, allowing him to get as much sleep as he needed. I don't know whether he saw them, but with every hour that the cogs in my head would go into overdrive, he'd stay in the corner more, sleep more throughout the day, when he'd usually be bounding around. I didn't take it out on him, but he must have picked up that I was starting to lose it at this point. The storm calmed down a little when I got to the beginning of day 6. I felt a nightmare of voices, banging and visits were going to come to an end with it. Saying I was wrong to be an understatement. The banging now became a regular occurrence in the house. I say this casually, however. Every single time I heard it, I winced, shrouded in the pure terror that the thing outside was one bang closer to get through to my wooden fortress, getting to me and doing whatever the fuck it wants to me. Every single time I thought I'd gotten closer to the rhythmic beat, my skin crawled and I braced as I hit the house creak. Every time I thought those wooden planks getting weaker and weaker. Every now and then I'd see its finger slip through the opening and feel around. It still had a Mrs. Peters voice, routinely intimidating her and asking me to come to it. After a few more days of the apparition, asking to come in with its filthy mitts, I hit something. Something out of place, of the usual please, that's come even more distorted than impatience. The sound of wood splintering. As I turned over to the living room window, I noticed a new light shining through the room. At first I thought this had already been there, but after a second barrage of knocking in the space for a few minutes, it got larger. More light sweeping in, and with it, I could see it. Parts of it at least. It was getting closer to me. The grotesque being before me must have noticed the weakening timber, too, as it let out another torrent, sending splinters, crashing again the thin window pane. My shelter was breached. I turned for Rex. Nothing. He just laid there, looking directly towards the window. The ball had moved next to his bed, still untouched from days before. Calling to him, his ears wouldn't even lift in acknowledgement of my cries. Not knowing what else I could do, I just stood there, waiting for whatever this thing had in store for me. I stood frozen in place for what felt like hours. Eyes glazed over watching it. The banging subsided shortly after, but it was still standing there. To my horror, a new sound resonated through my bones. A weak creaking. I couldn't work out what the hell it was until I saw those rotten fingers wrap around a plank of wood, directly eye level. They clamped around it through the thin cracks and suddenly started pulling at it. No. My vision started going blurry, and an overwhelming cussiness flared up beside me. The 2x4 started to bend and flex. With it, I could hear the sound of the nails being yanked out. One was ripped from safety of the window frame, and I heard it ping off to partial outside. Before I could even move, a block of light blinded me. The first plank was gone, and I finally saw its face. The thing was much larger than I imagined it though. I was in line with his mouth and jaw, or what was left of it, hanging completely agape. I could see 3 sets of teeth lining the roof of its mouth, all starting to separate places, but intertwining as they grew out. Many were missing, and a large majority of them were green and blackened. His lower jaw was devoid of anything. But that disgusting tongue! It hung there, loosely, detached from his lower jaw, which should have been its nest. I could see bloody crevices shattered inside, assuming that have been where the upper teeth had laid before. His jaw fell open. It didn't have any hair on its head, just a rotting scalp, lidded in craters, and missing chunks of flesh. The rest of his face looked ready to fall off. as the skin clung to its extremely bony features. Backs drooped around its soulless, eyeless sockets. To my dismay, the sockets were empty. Two vast charms covered into its skull, knowing no end deeper than any mountain is high. I left out a whimper, staring into this open mouth. I could see everything and nothing inside, all at the same time. Unsure if what I was seeing was a conjuring of my own rapt mind. It twitched immediately, its petrified body agonizingly close to ripping apart. After it had finished its centipede dance, it stopped, mannequin-like in front of the window. I took the chance and started to back away from the new entrance to my home. Right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. A moaning was let out by the antique wooden floor beneath my right foot as it ached from my weight of my body. As quickly as I turned to look at the source of the "I'm here" alarm, the thing started ripping at the rest of the panels, as if they were twigs. Its arms getting caught up in between the planks as they broke through. Blood oozing out of the old, infected wounds, scattered across them as it plunged further through. The sound of tree, flesh being ripped apart, was suddenly overridden by my voice in my head again. "Come here." I felt every syllable chime through me. This time was different though. This time the voice had a face to it. This time it matched the abysmal horror in front of me. I clamped my hands down my ears, trying to uselessly block out the barking, knowing I was simply waiting for my slaughter to start to wake up and step away again, turning around, so I could no longer see it. Crash. A sudden burst of adrenaline surged through my veins, throwing my limbs into overdrive as I started to run. Without thinking, I flung open the basement door, after locking it, embracing it with a small colony of boxes, paint cans and a shelf, placed rather annoyingly in any other situation, which I threw over the boxes for a good measure. I sat down there in silence for a long time. I could hear wet feet slapping against the wooden floor above me, and the occasional scream of frustration. It was directly overhead, and I could hear it muffled, disfigured, breathing, getting heavier by the minute. I followed it around the house, hearing each slap on the floor, as if it were having itself with each step. It would wander past the basement door, but never seemed to stop in front of it. I guess my adrenaline-fueled escape plan had worked for now. It was long after the footsteps ceased that I realized what situation I was in. How quickly I ran into the basement. I didn't have time to think about what I need down here. 12 feet above me, there was a kitchen full of food. I'd get hungry eventually, and I need to venture up there. Maybe the thing would give up and leave. I still didn't want to risk it though. So I waited it overnight. As the darkness consumed the night, the window of my basement became an abyss. I decided to try to get some rest and then go up once the sun had started to come up. The pattering of the rain outside comforted me and drowned out anything else. I woke up, looking to the window and still seeing no color. It felt like I'd slept for a while, but the sun wasn't out. I hadn't slept for a whole day and woken up at night? Had I? I didn't even have a way of checking. My phone was upstairs and whilst I did have to make the journey up there soon, My phone wasn't a priority. That's when my eye caught something in the corner. A 3-foot-high shadow, nestled next to the washing machine. Everything seemed to slow down for what felt like an eternity. The rain still hitting the glass outside at the same pace. I felt on high alert, every drop making my ears perk up, my eyes trying to pick up the still vague form in the corner. I could hear its muffled breathing, echoing across the basement. Eventually the shadow moved. It was as if the unknown entity had woken up and just noticed I was there, registering me. It started to approach. I could hear its nails skipping across the concrete floor. It got within 10 feet, and all I could see was a familiar white tuft of fur on his chest. It was Rex? That's when I realized I hadn't brought him down. In my own selfish, survivalist action, I forgot. I thought of going up for food, but not Rex. How could I forget him? But then I hadn't brought Rex down. How had he got down here? He was definitely still in his bed when I'd run away down the basement. Surely I couldn't have missed him running down the stairs with me. Even as I'm writing this now, he's still on the other side of the room. A light from the single bulb hanging from the ceiling doesn't reach that side of the cellar. He's still not come out of the dark. Every now and then, a light will flicker, and he seems to get closer. No matter how much I call him, he doesn't come out. He'll stand there at the edge for hours no end, looking directly in my direction. I've tried taking a closer look, but no matter how hard I try, all I see is a snow-like emblem on his chest, whilst the rest of him is obscured by darkness. It looked like it had to be him, and I'd forgotten he got down here. But whenever he'd stand, watched me for hours, I stayed prompted against the wall. My eyes never looked anywhere else but him. During the staring contest, I hear the voices again. Mrs. Peters calling me for help, and Susie crying too. They start off sounding as they were in real life. Each passing minute, they got progressively more disturbed. Rather than taking turns, they now sung an horrific duet at me. They wouldn't stop. They haven't stopped. I just want to make them stop. They're not even the worst part of the voices. It's not always there, but it creeps in from time to time. A maniac deep laughter will fill in the background noise, acting as a bliss to the withering woman's voices. I'm not sure how much more of them I can take. Susie's voice will routinely call me and beg me to open the window. When she speaks, I completely avoid looking to the part of the cellar, not wanting to see if she's there. I know she's not there, but if there was a face to this mocking of her, I didn't want to see it. Another few restless sleeps later, her voice would be accompanied with a whittling sound at the glass. I've started to place my hands over my eyes and looked open my fingers slightly, so I can just see the smallest section through them. This way I can slowly look at the window, with less chance of getting an eyeful. I scan each corner and work my way to the center of the glass, and each time I do, I see a new etching. It's trying to spell something again. It hasn't finished it yet, but I'll keep you updated on that. Now the voice, regimented of Mrs. Peters, hasn't stopped saying the same thing over. All it ever says is come here. Never ending. Once every dozen times it lowers and activates and gets more hoarse, sounding in even more pain each time. I hear that along with the wet slapping of feet upstairs. They won't happen every time, but after a few hours, they come back, taunting me, freely hobbling through my own house whilst I'm trapped down here. They've constantly bragged me, to the point that I'm unable to think of anything. I'm unable to feel anything. All there is are voices, the footsteps and the high-pitched scratching at the damn window. Even though the voices must have no host, I can clearly tell they're coming from somewhere. Susie's voice from the cellar window. Mrs. Beatus beckons from the top of the stairs. The only one that I still can't pin down is that laughter. I feel every bit of the malice in it. I feel the fact that whatever is making it really wants to hurt me. I've somehow handled the rest of this nightmare, just about, but whenever the laughter starts, I can't stop the tears from rolling down my face as I feel the hatred, instill it in terror. I'm completely powerless to it. They are nowhere, but they completely surround me. Every waking minute. I've managed to write all of this down now, and for the time in, however long I've been here, everything's down quiet. I can't hear any steps, no voices or laughs to torment me. Even Rex is sat in the corner and hasn't moved in the past half an hour. I think that's how long it's been at least. No way of actually telling. The howling winds and rain has eased up, and I can see still clouds of sky, still overcast with no hope for the sun to shine through and wash away the void, but no pitch black like before. Stillness in the air is refreshing, although stifled by the dust molecules that continue to circulate around me. The bulb dangling above me is starting to flicker enough. With each passing minute, the basement gets darker. I'm not sure how much longer I can stay down here. I think I'll just get some sleep now. Nothing else I can do. When I wake up, I'll make a plan to get out of this hell. I'll update you soon. It's me again. I've not got long to write this, but I'll get everything I can down. I managed to get some shut-eye. This, however, was disturbed with a loud smash. The light has completely gone out. I woke up to it, blowing out and sending shots around the room. Luckily, none actually injured me, and I actually got a sharp piece ready at my right thigh. At least now I had something to protect myself other than the bureau I'm actually using to write. Rex awoke from his slumber thanks to it too. He's not moved, but I can feel him starting to through me. With each passing second, he seemed to move, but when I close my eyes, he's right back to the same spot. I still can't focus on him completely, no matter how hard I try. It wasn't until he seemed to lower his head that I noticed the intruder to the left of him. The two figures slumped up against the wall. They're not really moving either. They both contoured awkwardly. Husky breathing followed suit. The trio are just sat directly across me. Even as I write this, I doubt you'd be able to read it with my quivering body. I'm trying to stay as possible. The footsteps have found their way to the door under the stairs, and since then, they've been pounding at it constantly. The box is tumbling down the stairs as the hits get stronger, the door weakening, clearing voices coming through now. Let us in. No distortion this time. It's definitely Emil's voice. He's laughing at me too. I've got no way out. Food will be meaningless if I'm stuck in a basement, and the prospect of trying to run doesn't give me a glimmer of hope. I think it's time to let go. I've lost. I'm going to sit with the others now. There's a slot for me to fit in between Rex and the others. Maybe it won't be so bad. Whoever finds this, just know I tried to fight it as long as I could. I hope this is a testament to that. This battle is with something way above me, way above you, something way above us all. I'd rather let myself go than be taken away by the thing upstairs. Goodbye. Hi, my name's Tim. I'm not relevant to this story, but I've just moved into my dream home and after hearing scurrying from my cellar, I stumbled upon this notepad. I managed to buy this place far cheaper than market value, and I think that's helped explain the madness that this poor soul went through. You see, when I was inquiring about the property, I asked why it was going for cheap. Apparently the previous owner was paranoid schizophrenic and stopped taking his medication. He hadn't left his house for a month, missing work too, so his manager went to check up on him a few times. After a few weeks of nothing and still seeing his house boarded up, he decided to call the police. They found him in the basement, slumped against the wall. He had slit his wrist and cut his eyes, using the shot glass. There wasn't anyone else there, and no signs of a breaking, just 3 black stains lined up against the wall next to him. I asked about the dog too, but nothing ever found to suggest he ever had one. There never was any storm of a century here either. I'm sorry I couldn't give you much enclosure to this, but I thought it was right to share a story. It seemed to be his dying wish, whether what he saw happened or not. My guess is as good as yours. All I can say is he's definitely something making noises in the basement. Probably just rats.